Hello, everybody. We are live. Welcome to yet another Alpha Hour in a Coincider live stream. Today, I'm here with VentureFounder, who is an analyst and researcher that I've seen on X post some really interesting theses and analysis. That's why I wanted to bring him on today to chat about all the very interesting thoughts he has about ETH, of course, about BTC, but more generally about macro, the Fed, QE, tariffs, all the juicy stuff that matters the most right now. But before we dive into any of that, can you just give us a quick intro, quick hello to the audience who may not have met you before?
Yeah. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This is Venture Founder from X, and my journey with crypto started in 2017. Over the years, I've been a pretty big ETH bull. I have had some bullish pieces on ETH, I'm looking to share a lot of analysis and my thoughts with you guys. I focus a lot on macro analysis, on the technical analysis, and cycle analysis, as well as on-chain analysis for crypto. So happy to share, and thanks for the invite, Kevin.
Awesome. I'm just waiting for people to give me a quick mic check, but we can continue just to make sure that they can hear us okay, because in my last stream, I messed up my settings and my mic was like way too loud. So I hope it's not an issue now. But I'm asking people to give us a quick mic check as we go.
Nice. It says it's 97% uploaded.
Yeah, that's different. Riverside also like creates a recording on our computer too.
Oh, I see.
That's separate from the stream. I think it's all good. Let's continue. So I want to ask you about ETH. I've seen you post some really interesting charts about ETH on your X profile and of course BTC. But before we get into any particular coin or project, can you just share with us your view on macro and tariffs? Because those are the two really big kind of news, like market driving activities right now.
Yeah, I think the tariff situation is pretty interesting. Crypto at this point, before the tariff even began, already had a really bad quarter in 2025. ETH it's down about 50%, close to 50% by the end of Q1, and this is all before Liberation Day, right? All before April 2nd, when Trump announced those reciprocal tariff, and then we started this whole chaos in the market, not just in crypto anymore. Actually, crypto has got a real relief because now the attention is on the equities and the bonds market. So, we've seen equities, U.S. equity being sold off. Traditionally, when equity is being sold off, you will see people flocking into bonds, right? The long end of the bonds for safe havens. But now the bonds are getting sold off too, right? So the 10 years and 30-year yields are going up, which is very unusual to see. And DXY, which is the US dollar index, has weakened as well, which means that people are selling all US denominated assets. And gold, on the other hand, is at all-time highs.
Yeah, that's
Gold is
crazy.
at 3,500, something like that. I saw yesterday Zero Hedge posted that gold has outperformed the S&P 500 by 47% year to date. Crazy amount of comparative returns between two asset class just in the first quarter of the year, right? And gold is a pretty muted asset most of the time. And
Yeah, it
this year
stayed in
just
a
been
range
ripping.
for like a decade, and then in the past year, it like rocketed so much. It's crazy.
Bitcoin has held up pretty well over Q1. I think we're down like 8%, something like that, year to date. I think part of that, I think it's to see that the narrative of Bitcoin being the new gold as a store of value, as a digital gold, is really playing out here. Clearly, it's not getting priced the same way as other risk assets. So that's very interesting to see.
Do you think that sticks, or do you think that's like not fully developed of a narrative or comparison yet?
Yeah, this I think is a good question. Looking at the price action so far, it certainly held better than risk on assets or risk on equities or Ethereum or other altcoins year to date. It's held on a lot better, right? And I think right now it's kind of this in between asset between like the narrative of being a digital gold, which will store value, and also have some attributes of a risk on asset. So it might just be the best of both worlds. When the times are bad, it doesn't go down as much, but then when times are good, it's once again being priced as a risk on asset.
Interesting.
So it's interesting to see this, but obviously it's still very new, right? We just got the ETF passed last year. This is only the first cycle where we see more institutional adoption on Bitcoin and actually people validating it as an investment, as an asset class. So, comparing with gold, which has 5,000 years of history, it is still very, very new.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So one thing interesting that I saw you post about is about the Fed and that you think that we may see a change from their actions, especially with Powell's term potentially coming up. Can you just share some general thoughts about that, about what you foresee coming there?
Yeah. So I think the situation is it's very interesting, right? We have Trump on social media yesterday calling Jay Powell a major loser.
Yeah, I saw that.
Actually, that was pretty funny to see a sitting president calling a sitting chair of the Fed a major loser. But I think it really reflected, the with how Trump is running his whole administration since the inauguration is he's employing people that are on his side, right? So it's like people that forward his agenda, right? We see like, whether it's Scott Bessent or Peter Navarro, he's employing all the people that basically can advance his agenda, whatever he wants to do. And with the interest rate, he's an advocate on rate cuts. He's an advocate on that we're behind on rate cuts, which means that either that Powell gets replaced next year when his term ends, or before that happens. But the direction that the Trump administration will push for is more rate cuts. It's probably more aggressive rate cuts. It's probably more QE after the rate cuts are done. I think Jay Powell has made it pretty clear that he's not going to initiate any QE program until the rates are pretty much at zero when the rate cuts are done. So, we're looking at maybe 3 rate cut this year with under Powell's administration, but we're just about 7 Fed meetings away from May 2026, which is when Powell's term will end. So in the worst case scenario, if you want to be more dovish about this, you can look at it as just 7 meetings away, 12 months from now. You will have a market that is very much going to the easing direction. Rates will be cut. If Powell gets replaced, he will get replaced at the May 2026, the latest. And the president appoints a new a Fed chair that's going to be more dovish, that advances his agenda, which is going to be more rate cuts and QEs and whatnot. It could be both at the same time. Who knows? It will be very bullish for the markets at that time. So we're just 12 months away from that point, the latest, right? And that resonation or replacement for Jay Powell could come even earlier. Legally speaking, he cannot be removed as a part of the Fed. However, he could be changed. The chair of the Fed could be changed into someone else, who probably is going to push for a different direction. If someone gets changed to that in that case, it will not be good look for because it compromises the independence of the Fed. But I think the market in the short term at least would price it very bullishly because cheaper interest rates are coming back. We have QEs coming. The market will once again be flooded with liquidity. That's when, if you look at history, the limited history we do have on Ethereum and altcoins, the QE and the liquidity, the excessive liquidity in the market, it's really what, pushes altcoins to all-time highs, right? And pretty much all asset classes go crazy, but risk-on assets like crypto especially.
I want to ask you though. So yes, everyone expects that cutting rates, QE is going to be great for risk assets, but ignoring that for a second and just thinking about like the broader economy, world markets, do you think that QE in cutting rates, do you think that would be good or bad for like the broader state, or do you think that would mess up even more things per se?
I think I've looked at the past few recessions we had and the rate cut cycle, right? Um, it's actually a bearish indicator when the Fed is cutting rates because it signals that the economy is not doing that well, and therefore we're cutting rates. We are trying to stimulate the economy, and in the past two recessions, in the past three recessions, it kind of the rate cuts actually um, began before recession happened, and just recession happens around the same time as the rate cuts. So it could be a bearish thing if you look at it that way. But right now, compared to the previous few recession we had, I don't think the U.S. economy had any structural problems. Like we're not in a situation in back in 2020 when there's a catastrophic worldwide event, which is
Right.
COVID. We're not in the 2008 where there's a subprime mortgage housing crisis. The economy overall, it is still pretty healthy, and it's a pretty healthy state. And people, consumer spendings, people are willing to spend money still. So other than the tariff, I don't think there's any immediate threat that we have to, go into a recession, other than people have been calling for the recession for some time. Um, so I think if the tariff situation gets resolved as quickly as we can, the U.S. can probably avoid a recession, which would be the best case. In this case, if we have rate cuts and QE, then I think the asset prices will be pumped to the next level. But if we do see a recession, and then the rate cuts happen, or the rate cut happen on the same time that U.S. economy falls into a serious recession, then the rate cuts and QE might not help that much, and we just have to bottom out from this recession and go up again. Um, so that's my view. So hopefully we don't go into a recession. I think the markets is um, the market has certainly priced in some effects of the tariff, but I don't think it's factored into the full extent of the tariff.
Interesting.
The market is still very hopeful that the tariff situation got resolved in 90 days, and therefore that's why we see equity prices have fallen, but they have not fallen as much as they should be if the full extent of the tariff is priced in. So hopefully it gets resolved, and this headline changes every day, right, with the Trump
Yeah,
administration. So
exactly. I
who
want to ask
knows?
you about that actually. So the market's optimistic, but what about you? What do you think? Like, do you think that we will get this resolved, or do you think it's going to be kind of prolonged, no really good deals, and we're going to get another leg down potentially in like a few months? What do you personally think
Mm,
currently?
yeah, I think it's gonna be resolved. Like the best case scenario is we go back to some sort of baseline for tariff. What I mean by that is, instead of having 145% or 200% tariff on China and a lot of economies, maybe it will step down to 20% or 10% tariff between countries and each other. It will have some impacts, but nothing that is going to really affect the people that are running these business internationally speaking. It will just be another round of inflation in terms of inflationary pressure on costs and everything. but it will not break the economy, right?
Right.
That would be the best case, is that if we resolve it to a baseline tariff and things just move on to this point, and Trump will focus his attention on his next item on the agenda, and this tariff thing is just like resolved, consider resolved, right? And that could happen in the next 90 days. We're only, 12 days, I think, into his 90-day pause. So still very hopeful that something will be resolved at the before the 90-day tariff pause ends. Um, yeah, I think the market is certainly hopeful about that as well, because this is I think it does not. It's hard for people to believe, and even for me to believe, that the U.S. will actually enforce these trade policies on a sustainable basis, because like there's so much pressures from the outside and on the economy side that are pressuring Trump administration to make a different decision, right? We um, on the main streets, there's all these different businesses. If we do actually go into a recession or whatnot, Trump's a lot of Trump's voters might not own as much equity, so they don't feel the impacts or the pain
Exactly.
right now. However, when they start losing jobs because of recession, they will feel the impacts, right? So right now it's not painful enough. So Trump's ratings or approval ratings among his core supporters have not changed. If anything, it might have gotten even stronger, because right now it's playing into his agenda of what he said he will actually execute once he become president. But among the people that own equities or bonds or investments, he's losing these supports pretty rapidly among the independents, right? So um, I think there's going to be a point where there's enough pain in the markets, and there's enough pain, there's enough scream coming from his supporters that he will actually change his mind, or
Got it.
back down, or declare a victory but back down.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Um, I want to shift focuses though and ask you about specific coins. Because the title of this had to do with ETH. I've seen you post a lot about ETH lately. You said you've been a bull on ETH, but of course, all this cycle's been pretty much battered, um, like beaten down the ETH BTC ratio, even versus Sol. But yeah, do you also want to screen share potentially, or you can just talk about it too, whatever works? I know you posted a lot of interesting charts that we could potentially look at.
Yeah, so let me see if I can share anything.
Yeah, if you just click the share button, you should be able to. Yep, we
Yeah.
can see
Can
it.
you see the screen? Okay. So actually, it's pretty interesting. Today we're seeing a very rare rally on Ethereum, along with Bitcoin, of course. But I think the ETH BTC chart is really, we'll want to take a look here. It is looking really terrible. There are just no relief rallies on this way down. It was just all the way down. I was looking at previously, looking at this chart. I was just comparing with the last time this happened. I feel like there's some similarities, and actually, I was hopeful for a bottom around 0.017, which is around this area, which is where it had a double bottom back in 2019, 2020. Um, and this area, I think, will at least see a reaction, if not a bottom, at this area. But yeah, since I think the merge happened somewhere around here.
Yeah, that's crazy. Around the top.
Yeah, it's around the top. So my thesis of ETH was that at some point, right, ETH is going to outperform BTC again if the cycle plays out like the previous times. We've seen, back in this halving cycle, from 2016, it was when they're having. I think halving was like around this time, right? And then, you know, Ethereum lost a lot of value against BTC. This is a pretty big drop too. I don't know what it is. It's like said 80% drop. Yeah. So this is the first ETH cycle, right? And then at some point, Ethereum started outperforming Bitcoin, and we made a new all-time high back in 2018. This was actually the cycle top here. So it's been through a couple of these fluctuations, and this was the cycle top. But this is the cycle top in dollar value. This is the cycle top in ETH BTC ratio. And last cycle, we saw something similar. So halving was the beginning of, it was May of 2020. So it was like here, right? So at this time, ETH was already bottoming out Bitcoins from this cycle bottom. So it was just trending up, right? But last cycle, we also had a lot of really bullish narratives for ETH. There were just so much going on. We had last cycle is where we saw significant development in DeFi, is where we saw there's all sort of interest and hypes around the ETH 2.0, right? We're going to switch from proof of work to proof of stake. There's all type of different layer twos that are launching. There's NFT, which started pretty much in 2021. So all these narratives really brought ETH to its new high, right? So over here. So what I was looking at before, when we're heading into this cycle, which is when was halving? Halving was 2024 May, so it's around like this area, I think. So I was looking at, we had, Bitcoin ETF being approved, Ethereum ETF being approved. From an investment or institutional perspective, these two are the only assets that are really going to benefit from institutional capital this cycle, right? So, and then I did expect Ethereum to lose some value against Bitcoin because that's what we've seen in previous cycles, but I did not think it will lose this much value, a year into the halving, pretty much.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is crazy, yeah. So that's what happened with ETH versus BTC. Certainly hopeful that this is somewhat of a bottom for ETH BTC. I was just looking at the common census of investing in ETH over BTC, right? If let's say we were to go back to the ratios that we had over here, like 0.0, 0.09, was where Bitcoin is traded right now. Ethereum should have been, $7,000, $7,500, and right now where it's at, it's $1,700.
Yeah, exactly.
So, that's the part of my thesis of being bullish about ETH going into this cycle, especially going to this year, was that we have find somewhat of a bottom in ETH BTC and it's going to turn up, right? So this would be a multiplier on the value you can get with BTC, because even if BTC does not go up anymore significantly in value, just a little bit of a change between ETH BTC ratio. If ETH BTC ratio were to rally 20% or something, you're going to see much bigger returns positioning yourself in ETH versus Bitcoin, right? However, as you can see, Q1, it just terrible. We're down like 50% ETH BTC. I think over 50% actually since the beginning of Q1.
What do you think can flip this? Do you think it's the start of QE or in anticipation of it? Or is there something else potentially that can flip this?
I think the reason we got to this point, it's because of a few things, right? Number one is the QE, the lack of liquidity in the market is certainly one of them. Number two, I would say, is the interest rate. So, after ETH switched from proof of work to proof of stake, we have a staking yield route, right? The staking yield for ETH is like something 3 to 4%. What is the Fed's funds rate right now? It's like 4.25%. So you're telling me that by positioning yourself in a risk-free asset, which is U.S. Treasuries, at Fed funds rate, you can earn more than what you earn from a yield perspective, comparing with Ethereum, with such a much higher risk than a
Yeah,
risk-free asset. So of
exactly.
course, it's hard to compete with the U.S. Treasury by by having ETH being a yield generating staking asset, right? So that also means if interest rate were to drop a little bit, let's say we drop another 1%, 1.5%, ETH yield is going to be a lot more attractive. I think that's going to bring back a lot of people looking at ETH as a yield generating asset, comparing with treasuries, and be like, we're going to allocate more to Ethereum. So that's two things that happened macroeconomics speaking. One is the QE, one is the interest rate, that I think negatively affected Ethereum versus Bitcoin. The other thing I think is just overall there's that lack of hype, lack of interest of what's been going on with Ethereum, right? NFT, DeFi,
All
both are
dead, kind of.
pretty, yeah, both are were big factors of the last cycle, right? They were there's a lot of people that are super into DeFi, a lot of people super into NFTs, very hardcore people. And this cycle, we haven't heard a thing. What is the the top NFT projects that launched this cycle? Probably nothing.
Thing, yeah.
And then the last cycle's darlings NFTs have pretty much died off as well. I mean, they're still trading about mint, of course, but it's nowhere where it would have been in the last cycle. And I think that's also kind of like a problem with liquidity, right? Like last year, last cycle, not only we saw the rapid increase in these like NFTs, tokens, and also on a lot of items like luxury watches, for example, Rolex, Patek, these kind of high-end watches are being traded at multiple times as retail prices. And now we have not seen that with the watch market as well. So
Exactly.
the lack of liquidity is really hurting a lot of these markets, especially NFT is not a market with a lot of liquidity to begin with. So when you don't have that liquidity, you don't have trading volume, you don't have people buying them up, then the price just stagnates, right? And with DeFi, it's more mature now than last cycle. I think the new administration it's definitely more open and favorable on the DeFi regulations, which is good. And that's why I think we saw like tokens like Aave actually are making an uptrend against ETH in this cycle. However, there's just not a lot of new and exciting things going on in ETH.
Agreed.
Solana, on the other hand, it's a separate story on its own because it's just a meme coin casino, right? I think Solana really benefited from that, similar to how Ethereum in the first cycle back in 2017 really benefited from the ICO boom. Solana benefited from having so much trading liquidity that's flooding in from retails into the meme coin markets.
Can
And
we
if you
see
look
that, by the
at
way? Can we see Sol ETH or ETH Sol, whichever one you
ETH
prefer?
Sol, yeah, I think we have Sol ETH. Let's see. So
Yeah, just want to get your thoughts on that chart as well, because you're speaking both fundamentally and
it's at a all-time high, I believe. I checked it a few days ago. Let's see. Oh, this is
Sol
Solana.
USDT,
Oh, this is Sol ETH. Yeah. So I made
Sol
my own
ETH.
chart. Yeah. So this is the chart that I made for Solana Ethereum. Um, yeah. I think over here, uh, like a lot of people were bearish. I think
Yeah.
in November they were bearish. They were
Dang, new all-time highs.
saying
Wow.
that ETH is making a comeback, and of course that didn't really happen. And yeah, so ETH is at a new all-time high, and it seems to be pretty comfortable here. Actually, I think I'm a little bit surprised that so ETH is still at where it's at, given that the meme coin bubble has pretty much
Exactly.
diminished.
Exactly. Even Pump Fun has seen its activity quite a bit lower than before.
Hmm. Yep. But that's where it's at. So a new all-time high. So we've but
Yeah.
Solana, it's if we are going to a bear market, like we're gonna see trading activities, interest drop off, people just drying like liquidity is really drying up in the market. I don't imagine that Sol is going to outperform ETH by too much, um, because these interests that are coming into Solana right now. If you look at the top traded projects on Solana, whether it's by market cap or is by trading volume, more than half are like meme coin projects, right? And those meme coin projects, what happens in the bear markets, we've seen in the past bear markets, they go down by like 99.9%. And then they would start again when a new cycle starts, when there's interest once again in the space, when there's liquidity in the markets. So if we're really going into a crypto winter kind of scenario, I would not be more bullish on Solana than Ethereum. But
That
of
makes
course,
sense.
Bitcoin dominance is still going up, and I think that this would be the base case for me, unless something changes
Can we
with
see that,
with
by the
the.
way? Can you pull up the Bitcoin dominance chart?
Let's have a look. Bitcoin dominance.
I'm specifically curious. Oh, right there. Yeah,
There we go.
BTC/USD.
Yeah.
I'm
Wow.
I'm specifically
64%.
curious where you think it's headed before it sets in the local top for this cycle, or cycle top, I guess.
Cycle top.
You think I can get close to 70 or higher? That'd be kind of crazy, no?
It would be crazy. Remove this. Yeah. So
Yeah,
let's do the weekly
70. Where's
chart.
the previous top in 2021?
It was 71%,
Yeah, do you
72%.
think we can hit that?
Possible. I mean, this is a pretty big rising ledge, so at some point it's gonna break, but
QE, I feel like that's when, right? New Fed chair,
if a chair,
rate cuts,
um,
QE.
yeah. I mean, we have seen this kind of um, ABCs where it's kind of playing like this. It's possible we're in like this top here, but we have to see. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's interesting to see the sentiment on Twitter or on X that a lot of people, even at this point, are calling people to sell Ethereum for Bitcoin when Bitcoin dominance is at 65%. Um, and ETH BTC is at a 5-year low, and the sentiment, at least on my feed, there's still a lot of people calling ETH uh, being an asset that's dead and
Yeah,
saying that they should swap all their ETH to Bitcoin. It's going to get worse. But it makes you wonder how much worse it can get. We're at a 5-year low already with ETH BTC, pretty much a reset for the past cycle. And Bitcoin dominance, it's at 64%, which is, pretty much it's a area that does not have a very long time frame. So this is like 84 days, about 3 months. That's about this area. Here we have about 294 days. Okay, so this is about a year. So about a year and a month. That's about this area.
interesting.
For the
Very
majority
interesting.
of the Bitcoin dominance chart, it's below this point, right? We have years of time below this percentage, and only maybe about 10% of the Bitcoin dominance history since this altcoin really started launching in 2017. That's above 65%, 64%.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's really interesting. Um, what are the other charts you have pulled up? Is there anything specifically or like in those other tabs or were those just like
These other tabs are just some on-chain indicators that I was looking at. So we could look at Glassnode, for example. Uh, so Glassnode, we're just looking at ETH. Some of the really interesting indicators is probably, looking at MVRV score for
Oh yeah, I saw you
Ethereum,
post about that too. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? So this is an indicator that shows you whether ETH is overvalued or undervalued compared to its fair value. As you can see, Ethereum hits almost at the bottom of this green zone here, which was last seen when ETH was about 1K back in the last cycle bottom. Or the previous cycle, we actually spent quite a long time here in this area. But going to this bottom of the range, ETH was about $100 back in March 2020 correction. And at the bear market bottom for the previous two cycles, 3 cycles ago in 2018, it's about $92. So right now, it hit this bottom when it's around 1.4 just recently, right? Um,
Very interesting.
I think on-chain indicators, it shows you a different image. It certainly looks a lot better uh, to say that Ethereum it's a good buy opportunity right now compared to what the technicals are telling you, technical analysis are telling you. Other things I was looking at is realized value or realized price. See this here, right? What's realized price for Ethereum? Realized price is sort of like the fair value for Ethereum right now, right? Realized price for ETH right now is 2K or trading at 1.6. Previous times we do have in the bear markets, Ethereum falling below its realized price, and each of those scenarios were actually a good buy opportunity in the long run. However, it could last quite a while. Like in
Yeah,
this case, the realized price was 255 and Ethereum was trading at $90. So it really fell below the realized price.
makes sense.
Here it was realized price was about 1.6. ETH was trading at 1.2. Right? So just some indicators to put your head straight about what we're looking at in terms of Ethereum. This is a chart that I made myself. This is ETH realized price multiple. So as you can see, Ethereum price divided by realized price multiple, we're at 0.8, which is below realized price. And the previous times when this happened was around the last cycle bottom, right? Like 0.8 was here, 0.7, it went even lower over here. The previous cycle is 0.5, 0.6. The lowest was 0.4, 0.36 over there.
Yeah, makes
So
sense.
yeah, these are just some of the indicators I was looking at for Ethereum. There's also the net unrealized profit loss. Looking at ETH, this one you can look at what kind of the market settlements are based on the unrealized profits and unrealized loss. And right now we're in capitulation. It's red. Last time that it was red, it was in the last cycle bottom, right? So this cycle, I think ETH's upside was very disappointing. We did not even hit the previous all-time high. Ethereum actually did not make a previous all-time high, which is very disappointing. On the upside, I think, because we never really had much of a bull market, I think the bear market scenario is potentially more muted as well, right? We didn't go up to the skies, and therefore Um, I think we're closer to the bottom than a lot of people think for ETH.
Very
Um,
interesting.
Also want to take a look at into the cryptoverse. This is Benjamin's crypto analyst analysis platform. I actually use this more than Glassnode now because it's pretty good in all sort of analysis. Definitely check out his analysis program. It's very good. Looking at ETH, I want to take a look at the returns. So yeah, like looking at where we kind of peaked in the cycle, it was actually a year ago. I think Ethereum's current cycle high was actually in March of 2024. So if you look at how long it has been, and we've just gone nowhere since March 2024, I would argue that we are already very deep into this bear market for Ethereum. We're closer to the bottom than a lot of people think, because the cycle top was a year ago. We already been in a bear market for a year, and
Interesting.
the November rally that happened in Q4 of 2024, that would be in this case a dead cat bounce.
Got it.
It's not uncommon because if you look at the previous cycle, our cycle top was September of or November of 2021, and then we see pretty big down drops, and then here back in July, about half a year, 8 months after, we have a 53% uh, 53% increase month over month return. That's kind of like a dead count bounce, and then it went down again for a few more months until we actually came out of this bear market. So I think this over here, even though price wise we hit $4,000, it seems like okay we're on our way to a new cycle top, and it just didn't happen. I would argue that the cycle top was actually in March of 2024, and we had already been deep into the bear market. And these 5 consecutive red months of Ethereum, it's pretty good indication that we're deep into the bear market territory. You would not have a scenario where you are in a bull market and you just see 5 red months that are down, double digits sometimes, right? It would be, uh, it's more similar to this period actually, right? So what's happening when we have 7 months of straight bear markets for Ethereum? That was 2018. This was a cycle bottom here, right? So January
Very
of
interesting.
2019. So I think we're closer to the bottom, but the key is paying attention to ETH BTC. It's paying attention to whether when Ethereum is going to bottom against Bitcoin. That's when I think you could really start being bullish about putting your money to ETH over Bitcoin. If you have like new capitals to deploy in the market right now, um, I do think that ETH is close to the bottom, but you still have to um, look at whether we could fall into a recession, when we will get a relief from the rate cutting and the QE side of things. So I would pay attention to ETH BTC, but price wise, like dollar price wise, I think we're closer to the ETH bottom than a lot of people think.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Um, yeah, I think you shared some really great analysis, really thought-provoking things I haven't seen before on X. So really appreciate that for today stream. We definitely want to have you on, and in the retail DAO, I know you joined that, so would love to just share your analysis, share your posts with our community there. But really appreciate you hopping on today and sharing your thoughts on macro, on tariffs, and on ETH, which is the title of this stream, which is Venture Founder on when to buy ETH. So I think I have a better understanding of that. Um, and already included your X profile in the description, but do you have any final words to share with the audience for people, like where to find you, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so I post mostly on Twitter, on X. So if you guys like what I'm talking about, I sometimes post contents about ETH, about macro analysis, and yeah, I'd love to share more updates on ETH as we go through this year. I think it's going to be a very interesting year. Like the Q1 is totally not what I expected as it happened. So you know, I think this it's coming May FOMC meeting with the Fed is going to be a banger.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe we'll get more interesting things out of it. But either way, I'm still long-term bullish on Ethereum, right? I think at the price that it stands right now, it is, in my opinion, a great price. However, I also thought it was a great price when we had that correction in October, when ETH was dipping to like 2.2, and obviously we're down a little bit, quite a bit at the lowest from then. So I think if you're long term about this asset, it probably doesn't affect you too much. But short term wise, in positioning yourself in this year, there's more factors to be considered. As
Sure.
always, if you are positioning into a new asset like Ethereum, um, do it in tranches instead of all at once, right? Whether we're at the bottom or the top. It always helps when you have, multiple deployment opportunities. If the price dips or if things changes, and you can pause your strategy a little bit and just wait and observe, and you still have dry powders on the table, right?
It's always good. All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your great analysis with our community.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah. Appreciate you having me on and join Retail DAO.
Sure.